Well, I think we're in a period of calm before the storm when it comes to any potential conflict between the U.S. and Iran. So I finally want to use today as an opportunity to talk about Libya, which I've been chomping at the bit to do, but the Iran news has been so much more pressing. As anyone who's been subscribed to mine for a while knows, I've been following the situation in Libya for a very long time now, and I've been very closely monitoring this stalemate over, the capture of Tripoli, because it seemed like it for a long time that Khalifa Haftar was, going to pretty easily consolidate power in Libya and to, conquer all the disparate factions, since he was the biggest and most powerful force there. And then all of a sudden he just, hit a brick wall in Tripoli. And in resisting Haftar for so many months, as the Tripoli government has done, they've shown that there's some life left in them, and that they're not necessarily worth abandoning yet. Even though that they control so little territory, they've been able to hang on to what little they have under pretty crushing opposition. And that, I'd imagine, is why Erdogan, the president of Turkey, has decided to send in troops to Libya, which they've done pretty quickly. From the time that Erdogan announced that he made a deal with the Tripoli government, the Turkish parliament very quickly passed I guess it was a resolution or an act. I'm not exactly sure what the official title of whatever it was they passed was, but they passed some ordinance ordering troops into Libya. For the first time since the fall of the Ottoman Empire, Turks were going to fight in Libya. And this, of course, enraged the regional allies of Haftar, which is the Arab monarchies plus Egypt, the Sunni states, the typical Sunni states, minus, of course, Turkey, because these are the states that are not fans of the Brotherhood. Turkey, of course, works pretty closely with the Brotherhood. And so now that the Turks are finally starting to wash ashore in Tripoli, and that there are actually now Turkish troops apparently in Libya, we're seeing a lot more potential for these other regional actors to get directly involved in the fight in Libya. Because so far this has been a proxy war for years. It's been, people on different sides backing whichever faction in Libya they thought suited their interest. Egypt being probably the country with the most at stake here, and the most to gain. Egypt would be very happy with Khalifa Haftar on the throne in Tripoli, controlling all of Libya. Haftar is a very similar figure to General Sisi of Egypt. They're both essentially coup leaders. And so it would be it would be a lot better for Egypt, rather than to have this very unstable anarchic country in the midst of an endless civil war as a neighbor. And it would be much better to have a government controlling that country that was similar to their own. And so if anyone is going to get involved directly in Libya to stop the Turks from hardening the defenses in Tripoli and denying Khalifa Haftar hegemony in the country, it would be Egypt. And if the Turks' operation in Tripoli is successful, and they actually start to push Haftar back and retake some of the country, I would think that Egyptian involvement would become a pretty big risk. But for now, I think that all sides are treading fairly lightly as far as this is concerned. There's a lot of tough talk, certainly, but the Turks, I don't think, are being as aggressive, let's say, in their defense of Tripoli as they could be. For now, it does not look like Turkey is sending over an army to fight in the Libyan civil war. They are sending advisors. This is similar, of course, to what the U.S. did for a few years before the full escalation of the Vietnam War. They just sort of had military advisors there who were conducting training operations and in leadership roles, but not really fighting on the front lines and trying to actively engage and fight the war. And so, to me, this seems to show that the Turks do not have any intention of trying to help the Tripoli government retake all of Libya, at least as of right now. It seems like they are focused on just holding Tripoli, because this is much more of a defensive move. The Turks know that the Tripoli government is incapable of conquering the whole of Libya away from Khalifa Haftar's troops. And so if they wanted to kick Haftar out of the rest of the country, what they would be doing is sending their own troops to do that. They would be sending Turks to fight the Libyan National Army. But of course, if the Turks did intervene to that extent, to where they were on the front lines fighting against Haftar's troops, I think that Egypt would be much more obliged to intervene on Haftar's behalf. Because it's not really a fair fight to have Turkey versus this ragtag band of the so-called Libyan National Army, and that's when things really have a potential to get out of hand, because then you risk a war between Egypt and Turkey, which of course are both U.S. allies. Now Turkey is a NATO ally, but I don't believe that they could invoke the NATO treaty in this case, because they willingly went into Libya. So I think if Egypt attacks them after they're in Libya, I don't think that they could somehow invoke the NATO treaty to start a NATO-wide war against Egypt. And so the worst case scenario in Libya, I don't think would be anything that would necessarily rope in too many countries. It would not be World War III. However, I do think that the amount of attention that people are paying to Iran with respect to the whole World War III thing is a little overblown relative to the attention paid to Libya, which is none. Libya still looks like a potentially very big mess. Of course, it's been a big mess since 2011 when they overthrew Gaddafi. Now, looking instead from Libya's east at Egypt, taking a look at their west, of course being Algeria, it's interesting to see which side they've ended up on. Now, France, Algeria's old masters, Algeria, of course, was a part of France for, I think, over a century. They are on the side of Haftar right now, I believe France is. Although officially recognizing the government in Tripoli, since that is the UN-recognized government, they do seem to be partial to Haftar. They've condemned the Turks sending in troops there. But the Algerians, which typically follow France when it comes to this sort of foreign policy stuff, seem to be more on the side of the Tripoli government. Now, they had a meeting recently with the foreign minister of Turkey, I should say the president of Algeria did, and then he had a meeting with the head of the GNA government in Tripoli, and while not expressing direct support and saying, you're the legitimate government of Libya and all that, and Haftar should lay down his arms and give you the whole country, what he did say was that, conquering Tripoli would be a red line. Now, I'm not sure in what sense he meant that. If he meant that Algeria would get involved in the war if Haftar did manage to conquer Tripoli. But, of course, what point would there be at that stage of the game? Because then Haftar would, control everything in Libya. Tripoli is what he's missing. So, I can't see Algeria intervening along with Turkey on behalf of the GNA after the GNA has been completely overthrown. So to me, this just seemed to be lip service. But it is interesting to note that the Algerians are taking that side. So one last note, Haftar did, while he still has not been able to take Tripoli, he did take a nearby city, which was Sirte, and that apparently, from what I've been seeing, was met with little to no resistance from the GNA. I guess the GNA has moved pretty much all their forces to Tripoli and has said to Haftar that, hey, if you want the rest of our territory, which is very little, come and take it. But I believe Sirte is a port city, so they should be able to move resources from Benghazi there to aid the battle in Tripoli a lot easier. Of course, before, I think the only way they would have had of transporting anything was by plane or by road, though I'm not sure if Haftar's Air Force has any transport planes in its fleet. I think they've only got a few fighter jets and things. So I think that about sums up all my new thoughts on Libya that have been tinkering in the back of my mind over the last couple days. And so tomorrow, I expect we'll be back to the topic of Iran. There's some interesting movements this morning going about. I guess there's some leaks that the U.S. is expecting something to happen in the next couple of days. They apparently are moving 6 B-52s into CENTCOM. And they apparently also plan to be building an airport in Anbar, which is going to accommodate some B-52s, though that wouldn't come in time for some Iran war that's any time in the near future. So that seems to be more of a precaution. So I guess if they are able to construct that airport, then nothing will have happened. But still, the chatter is that something might be happening in the next couple of days, possibly tonight. So if that does happen, I will certainly be on it tomorrow. So if you gain anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.